So is life any different as a Grammy winner as it was before?
It's so different. You have no idea.
Like you don't have to wait in line at the grocery store or nothing, huh?
Right, exactly.
Crazy.
And it's amazing because I get charged twice as much now, and
Hey, me too. I didn't even win a Grammy. So the basic conversation here we've been doing, this will be week 19 of our effects on violin series. And we've done EQ and compression and verb and delay and all kind of your standard effects on violins. And then like the idea behind this discussion is that the Eventide ecosystem it does use a lot of those things, compression and verb and delay and all those, but it packages them in a way that is unique, I think, to their system. And it's really kind of its own thing, right?
yep.
So I wanted you to maybe, if you could, just talk about what that ecosystem is and what parameters it's got and all the resonances and things that you use to make your art.
It's all about evolution, and it started a long time ago with the H3000, the harmonizer, the ultra harmonizer. And some of those original sounds, that was a big rack mount unit, that just caught blew my mind. And what Eventide has done, and it's the quality is the thing, is really the thing about the Eventide products. And they have been able to make those sounds available in stomp boxes, as well as in plugins for software and for DAW. And so a lot of those same effects that existed back 25, 30 years ago still exist now, except they're even more. So I still count with some of the original sounds, crystals and shimmer and harmonizer. But what they've done is they had this series of factor pedals, which I had, and then came the H9, which was that had all the factor pedals. So this is the H9 control, which is for desktop as well as for iOS and etc. This is just these are the different guides that are in there. But so it's got space, algorithms, pitch, time. So these are the pedals. These were the original stomp box pedals from Eventide. The space, the pitch factor, the time factor, mod factor, where you had the chorus, phaser, flanger, rotary, tremolo, and then algorithms that were created for the H9. So that's essentially the H9 was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's 5 pedals in one. And so I actually was having two or three H9s on my pedal board. This is still in my system. And then this magical box called the H90 came around. And the H90 is actually kind of equivalent to two H9s. Here's all the different effect types that are in it. Let me just, so delay, EQ modulation, pitch, synth, distortion looper, multi effects, and then all these are all the different algorithms that are inside. A delay, and this only has one algorithm in it. And I go to Weird Tune is another one that I use. Now this has a harmodulator and a filter pong together. Octave delay is another effect that, so they come, there's presets, factory presets, and then I get a hold of them and then they become user presets and then I rename them and they become what I create my pieces, my songs, my compositions, my improvisations with. Then if it gives me the option of how to route it, so I can route it in series or parallel without moving anything. So right now it's in series. If I wanted to put it in parallel, it's got lots of controls. You can attach all kinds of foot switches and expression pedals and have them mapped to all different things. Usually, mainly what I use it for is expression. I've got it hooked up to the expression pedal, and you see in the wet mix, that's what it's mapped to, and the pitch in the harmodulator. So I can change any of these parameters. I need to be able to have control, so to preset them so that I can do my performances. This Shimlow gives it's the amazing shimmer algorithm, and so I have it down. It's got two pitches down, a couple of octaves to up some octave and change. Lots of cents, dollars and cents involved in that.
I mean, it's one of the things that they advertise. They'll call it the H9 harmonizer, but it's really so much more than that.
Yes. And even like the H9, even that at first it was only one effect at a time. It wasn't multi effects at the same time. But the single effects, the delays were so good, it actually sounded like there was reverb and delay and resonance. So it really didn't need that much in addition to that. And then now that's all in the H90.
The H90 is relatively new, right? That just dropped in the last year, right?
This is second year that it's out. Yeah, it's in its second year, but it took a while for some of the features to really come online, like the iOS, so that I can now control it through my iPad instead of having to hardwire it to the computer.
Is that a Bluetooth control then?
Yeah, Bluetooth.
That's amazing.
Right, now you know all my secrets.
So one of the things that I noticed is that a lot of those effects respond very differently to percussive playing, like the Collegno or the pits, than they do to arco.
Yep, yep. And therein, that's what really makes the magic is when working with um, strings, bowed strings, um, with percussion, the attacks of the notes, whether you're playing pizzicato with your fingernail or the flesh of your there's so much dynamic range in what you can do, and one particular algorithm can just sound so totally different depending on the articulation you're playing or I'm playing.
I
And
don't use articulations. I just hit the thing.
yeah, well, see, and that is why years ago, and you know, there weren't that many electric instruments on the market, and some of the early electric instruments were by Zeta,
Hmm.
and they were MIDI, or a good, you know, that was sort of the catchy thing at the time. And I never went in that direction because at that time, I'm sure it's that's evolved since then, but um, you had to be really consistent with your touch, or it wouldn't trigger. And for me, that I didn't have any interest in that because it's all about the touch, or
Right.
that's a big part of it, is the sensitivity that you can get from, you know, different kind of vibrato, different bow pressure. Um,
Yeah, it's one of those things that's hard to notate, right? We can put the football on the piece of paper, and you know we you've got a B flat there. That's great, but there's 1,000 ways to play that B flat. And we put an accent or a dot or some sort of marking on that to give the performer an idea, but there's like an infinite number of choices on how to play that one note that you can't possibly notate that.
um, it's a combination of creating a way of notating it and explaining. And now, you know, and of course, more recently, demonstrating and putting up a playlist on YouTube, which I did, and actually I'm going to refer to it again because just the next season was just announced by the Bangor Symphony, and they're doing Invisible Hands. I'm going to go up there um, and solo with them on Invisible Hands. And that has I have a whole playlist on YouTube, of the different techniques that the string players need to do that they're not used to doing, which includes left hand percussion and combination of and so they'll be playing acoustic instruments, but on a this kind of thing, you know, maybe bass players are more used to. How do you write? You know, that's not traditional notation. So I had to come up with a way of notating that. So I did. So that's all in the score. And then I have a playlist of I don't know how many, 12, 15 demonstrations of the different techniques that are used, including my famous, you know, the birds.
Mhm.
I've actually had composers ask me, how do you notate the birds? You know? And then and teaching string players how to do something that you're intentionally not trying to produce a tone, but it's you know, I think one of the first times things that I heard Daryl Anger years and years ago was to enact, you know, become a rhythm,
Mhm.
you know, a drum kit with a brush, and that started opening the door for me, as well as Jean-Luc with all the sounds that he got. So just exploring how different players approach the instruments, um, their what's in their repertoire, and appropriating that, or adapting. Um, and it's fun it's fun, and it's amazing to see when I in my studio at the university, um, to see how the students then adapt it to their own, bringing their own ideas into it, along with also working with the electronics, or a combination of acoustic and electric. So it's just it's evolution, and it's adding, it's cumulative. You keep adding to the palette.
Well, and that's a thing that Rudolph had talked about at Mark Wood's camp a few years ago that always stuck with me. He said, we get so fascinated with these knobs and buttons and pedals that we forget that we play an instrument. Like, you've got to make sounds with that instrument, and then that becomes just part of the ecosystem that are the pedals and the knobs and the buttons.
Yes.
So it's the whole thing. So as you're exploring new sounds that the instrument can make, and then you go, okay, let's explore these new sounds that I can make with my left and my right hand. And then how do we electronically manipulate those to make even more sounds, right?
Yeah, and that is something that really, that takes composition and music creation, sound creation, sound design to a whole other level, where Mozart, it's like, well, okay, he heard the requiem in his head, and then dictated exactly what he heard in his head. I don't hear this in my head until I get in there and just start experimenting and playing. I can get a concept in my head and explore until I find a sound, an environment that that represents the concept, and then start delving in through to that, and creating the sounds and the music and the form. And they come at different times depending on what it is.
Well, some of these effects in the Eventide system have got so many different pitch shifters and resonances and all these things that there's no way that you could predict in your mind how a given chop or something on the instrument is going to translate. And especially since some of them take like several seconds to happen,
Mm-hmm.
they can interact with other sounds that are being made. So like, as a composer, there's a bit of a control freak in us, right? That, you got to play it this way. And that's why I'm writing it and notating it. But then there's also got to be sort of a letting go of that control freak. And like, once I hand off that sound to this effect, it's going to do a thing that I couldn't really predict.
Right. And that's the exciting part. And it's also, this is, I think, one of the, I don't know, skills or experiences that I think it has really taken shape for me in the latter part of where I am in my career path, my life path so far. And coming to terms with the not knowing, and embracing the not knowing, or what we had thought of as mistakes, or something didn't work, or if something comes unplugged, or it's not whatever, it didn't do what you expected it to do. It does something totally different. And I've learned to just enjoy those moments and really embrace them as opportunities. And and I see that in this my students as well, now starting to build to their creativity and um, not just it's reformatting, it's reframing, it's pivoting, instead of being, angry or upset that that sound came out. Is wow, that I never would have thought of that otherwise, and where can that lead me to? I mean, you don't want to be doing that, of course, in the middle of an orchestra concert necessarily, but you can make a mental note. But if you're on stage and you're doing your thing and you've got improvisation in part of it, and you have this space to expand on that in the moment, that's such an amazing opportunity. And I personally I've come up with a lot of new directions in my music because of that. So, but then you could also get mad and storm off the stage, but that's
That could be part of the show. I don't know.
well,
That's a different kind of show.
yeah.
So maybe talk a little bit about, because in the Eventide that they do call themselves a pitch shifter. It seems like there are pitch elements to nearly every control aspect of that. Like in the resonances, there's a pitch element to that. In the delay, there's pitch elements to that. There just seem to be a lot of different pitch elements in that software that you don't see in a Helix, or you don't see in a lot of stomp boxes.
Yeah, it does depend on the algorithm. Some of them are just delay, some of them are delay with pitch. Trying to see if I can hang on there. I'll share the screen again.
I think that's where a lot of the complexity in the sound comes from too, is because you're playing a note and then all of a sudden there's other notes coming out, or other frequencies being generated that you didn't necessarily make.
Yeah. So you've got all the effect types, and let's see. Okay, delay. Say I go for a vintage delay. So any of these are vintage delays. Let's say, I don't know, vintage vocal. And then I look at it at the parameters, and that's this. And what's in here, there's no pitch in this one. It's when you combine it with another algorithm.
Mm-hmm.
But if we were only looking at the delay, this has delay mix. It does have some mod depth and speed, and feedback, and that's what it gives you some of the complexity. But in itself, it doesn't have pitch control. This is showing you, like, these are factory settings, and they have one of the new ones, which is amazing, is the polyphony algorithm. And this gives you all different levels of detuning and pitch shifting and delay and feedback. That's all just in this one. And then you combine it with other effects, and you're off the rails.
Yeah, that is such a huge, you've just got such a huge bank of sounds to pull from.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and it can be intimidating at first when you're looking at all these knobs and whistles, but then you sort of get to understand what they do, and not be afraid of trying certain things. The main thing is, don't save it if you don't like it, or save it as a different name.
Right.
So there's a little bit of stuff to overcome when you're starting with something new, and there's always a certain learning curve involved.
It's not the kind of thing you're going to buy today and then take it out tomorrow and play a show with it.
You could. That might be really full of surprises, that show. Like, oh, okay. Um, yeah, it's kind of like I've seen people, they got a brand new instrument. It's got more strings than they usually do. They've never played it before. They take it out of the box and they're going to play it in a show. And like, it doesn't have the same power. It needs um, an active DI, or it needs something to, to push it, and or it's, it just feels so different, or whatever it is. Yes, you do want to try to take some time to work with an instrument or an effect processor before you actually perform with it.
Well, if you had some advice for people that are thinking about buying an H9 or an H90, what would your advice be for them?
First, know that it's an investment, um, because they're not inexpensive. That said, they're, if you're an educator, if you're a student, there's ways to get, talk to your dealer for discounts. But these are top of the line quality boxes, and when you plug into them, it's not going to detract from your sound. It's going to help enhance. It's going to complement what you're plugging in to it. So if you were to, A B this box and then a really inexpensive single delay unit, you would hear the difference. And then if there's something that you're not hearing that you think you should be hearing, that's when you can get in to the nitty gritty and tweak it and find out what's going on. And if you're still not sure, then you look at some of the Facebook groups, or whatever the user groups, and you ask, or you call up the customer service. So I think that for what you're getting with each of them, is no comparison as far as I'm concerned. And I know that when I go into a performance scenario and there are other players, like if there's other string players, for example, and I go in there and I've got one box and my looper pedal, and they've all got their huge pedal boards and whatnots, and I play a note and it fills up the entire space. Okay, that's what I do. That's my personal sound. I use stereo effects. That's very important to what I do. And it's very different than if my approach was to, be playing in a rock and roll band and competing with guitars and drums and whatnot. But again, that's where you have this one unit can do all of that. You can take it and play in a rock band or a hip hop band or a jazz band, and all this sounds are in there, and it's just a matter of you can create your own playlists and combine the sounds and learn how to change them on the fly or hook up the expression pedal. So it's top of the line. So you are going to pay for that, but it's a solid piece of gear, and it just sounds awesome.
Yeah, I know the guys in Black Violin each have them, and they use them very differently than you do, but they sound
Yes.
great.
Yes, and some people that they'll just, well, because there's other here. I'm going to dive down into the lower level here. And this is my auxiliary pedal board. So these are other stomp boxes that are made by Eventide, but so this is the black hole, which is it's an algorithm in both the H9 and the H90, but you can also, if you only want the black hole, which is an amazing delay, reverb rather, you can, it's half the price of the H9. But there's 5 stomp boxes in the H9 and there's 10 stomp boxes in the H90. So then there's the Rose, which is their favorite analog pedal.
Mm.
And so I don't know if that's in there or if it's in there yet, or they call it something else, but this is like a one of a kind.
Mm.
So that's for, different tastes for different folks. So yeah, lots of fun with lots of pedals.
Well, I know you've got other places to run off to, but thank you for taking the time to chat with us today. And yeah, let people know where they can find you and your music, or where you're going to be performing.
Yeah, well, this Saturday, May 11th, I am going to be up in Newtown, Connecticut. It's the Edmond Town Hall Theater. And it's Saturday, May 11th. And I'm bringing my special guest, wonderful friend, Rozelle, to join me for some electric viola and beatboxing. Well, we'll see what happens with that. So that's the most imminent. There's some recordings coming out later in the summer that also feature this gear, but I can't talk about them yet.
And then people can find everything you're doing on your website, right?
Website, I got YouTube channel and Instagram, Elec Viola, at Elec Viola. And yeah, I got people that, just sort of zap me questions about gear, just sort of out of the blue. And I'm happy to help. I'm happy to offer suggestions, but again, it's going to be things that resonate with me. And so I'm always going to suggest that each person needs to really, it's like, it's an individual taste in instrument and in bows. So you got to find your voice, and it takes some time with that.
Or if a person wanted to study to be a well-rounded string player who's relevant in the upcoming world, and they wanted to get a degree in that sort of thing.
Well, multi-style strings program at New Jersey City University is such a program where you can come in as a classical player, as a jazz, fiddle, hip hop, klezmer, any style or no style. It's all valid. And we have the faculty, we have the gear, we have the experiences and the collaborations. That is something that you can't write into a curriculum. You can't anticipate the kind of collaborations that can come when you put players of multi-styles together and they start experimenting, collaborating, playing with each other. And so that's just the icing on the cake, I think, of what's going on here. And in fact, I have to run off soon to a recital for one of my grad students, a cellist that is going to be using loops and singing and all kinds of other things going on in there. So I'm looking forward to that.